Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, air, restoration, and flood services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit BillHowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. The San Diego Convention Center is about to get some much-needed repair and renovation. KPBS reporter John Carroll says visitors to San Diego will be footing the bill.
With its sweeping white sails and rounded glass windows, the San Diego Convention Center still looks like a pretty modern building. But the west side will turn 37 this year, and the east side will mark its 25th anniversary in November. The building is critically important to San Diego's economy, says Mayor Todd Gloria.
I think there are a few buildings that provide more positive economic impact in our community than the San Diego Convention Center. Over $1 billion of regional impact, over 1,000 people who are directly employed.
Over at the Convention Center, Corey Albright is showing us around. He's the chief of infrastructure and modernization.
So the roof is first. That is the project that's anticipated to be first. Some of the other ones are longer range projects, so central plant replacement. That's our boilers, our chillers, everything that creates the air and temperature control in the building. That's a multi-year phased replacement.
The money to do all this comes from the transient occupancy tax. Visitors to San Diego pay that when they stay in hotel rooms. The closer you are to the convention center, the higher the tax. The city started collecting that tax last May after a court gave the go-ahead. It has its beginnings in Measure C, which an appeals court ruled the voters had indeed approved back in 2020.
So what the voters blessed was a 2% or so increase that goes for those three purposes: convention center modernization, roads, homelessness, and that money will be in place for decades to come, which gives us that reliable resource to do those three things I think are really important.
Back over at the convention center, Corey Albright took us to one place set for a major repair, and something you might not expect. A big part of the renovations here will be fixing a somewhat leaky roof. That means something that's been up here for many years will be going away. Believe it or not, there are tennis courts on the roof of the convention center, though they have not been used for well over 10 years now. They used to be an amenity for guests of the Marriott. They will be replaced with a new roof designed to be solar ready. The importance of all this is to keep San Diego competitive in the highly competitive world of booking conventions.
These kinds of investments are noticed by the industry. They plan far in advance, and when they see things like Measure C be adopted by the voters of San Diego, the city council taking this adoption vote, and probably more importantly, when they start to see the improvements get underway, they will continue to come back here over and over again.
The work should begin very soon, and in case you were wondering, Albright says through careful planning, the convention center will be able to stay open through all the renovations and upgrades over the coming years. John Carroll, KPBS News.
I'm Ariella Scalise, and coming up tonight, another partly cloudy night with temperatures down into the 50s. This warm, dry stretch brings us to the end of the week. We will watch the return of some low clouds and even some windier weather. We'll have a closer look coming up.
Tonight, President Trump will deliver the 2026 State of the Union address to a joint session of Congress and to millions of Americans watching from home. The speech comes on the heels of a Supreme Court decision that struck down a key piece of his economic agenda and foreign policy. Ivan Rodriguez has the latest from the nation's capital.
Tonight's State of the Union comes at a tumultuous political moment for President Trump.
It's going to be a long speech because we have so much to talk about.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt previewed what Americans can expect to hear during the speech.
A large portion of the speech will, yes, focus on the economy. The president will lay out the case for why he and Republicans are better suited to continue tackling the affordability crisis that was created by the Biden administration and Democrats on Capitol Hill.
Last week, the conservative majority Supreme Court struck down Trump's emergency tariffs, a centerpiece of his economic agenda. Trump lashed back by using a different authority to announce a new global tariff, now at 15%. Congressional Democrats say he's out of touch with American voters, feeling squeezed in the current economy.
Americans, including myself, who will be in the chamber tonight, want the president to focus on lowering the cost. He promised day one, John, I'm going to bring down the cost. It's like day 410. He's 0 for 410.
With midterm elections looming in November, Republicans on Capitol Hill also have a lot at stake as the president lays out his goals for the year. New CNN polling conducted by SSRS finds 32% of Americans now say that Trump has had the right priorities, while 68% say he hasn't paid enough attention to the country's most important problems. That's the president's most negative reading on that question to date during either of his terms in office. I'm Ivan Rodriguez reporting.
While many will be in attendance for the President's State of the Union speech, 3 local Democrats will not be in the audience. Representatives Sarah Jacobs, Scott Peters, and Juan Vargas will all announce that they will not attend the State of the Union through posts on social media and statements made to the media. The 3 cited disagreements with Trump's policies on immigration, health care, and violations to the Constitution as reasons for not attending. Representative Mike Levin says he will attend and is bringing the daughter of an immigrant couple who were deported by ICE as his guest. And PBS will have special coverage of President Trump's State of the Union address. You can watch the speech and analysis, and that begins at 6 o'clock tonight here on KPBS. California voters approved Prop 50 last November, redrawing the state's congressional map to favor Democrats. Well, here in San Diego, the biggest change was to the 48th district, currently held by Republican Congressman Darrell Issa. KPBS and our partners at iNewsSource created a new online tool to see how these maps changed and what voting patterns shifted in the past few elections. And to talk about the project, I'm joined by Public Matters reporter Jake Gatto. Welcome, Jake.
Thank you for having me.
So what is the local impact of Prop 50? Has it changed much in San Diego?
Well, yeah, so all of the districts here, we have 5 congressional districts, and they all got reshaped to cover sort of different areas of San Diego. But the biggest impact was to that 48th district in North County. And these maps that we have online show you how all the lines change. You can click on your district and see if it changed, see where you live, and see how those things have changed. But up in the North County, where District 48 is changing, it has really been a Republican stronghold for a long time. It's been held by a Republican in Congress for several cycles, and now with Prop 50, it's changed the balance of voter registration in that district to where previously there were more registered Republicans in 48th, now there's more registered Democrats, and that's really putting the district in play ahead of this midterm election.
Well, what we do know is that not everyone is happy with the result. So let's hear a clip from the executive director of the San Diego Young Republicans.
Prop 50 may have been well-intentioned by the left, right? But here in Fallbrook, the result is really just confusion, fragmentation, and a loss of identity. It's really, really sad for this community, and we're one that suffers because of Prop 50. At the end of the day, we need representation that understands rural needs.
So what about the Republican voters? Do they feel like they're losing representation?
Well, the first thing to remember is that this whole map change started when Texas Republicans redrew their map to try and favor Republicans. And California Governor Newsom, the state legislature, they were very clear about Prop 50 here being a response to that in Texas. They say they're trying to level the playing field. But at the same time, in those districts, someone still has to win that race. The race isn't decided. There's no predetermined winner, and a Republican can still go out and win that race if they have a good campaign, if they connect with voters, if they do the things that currently Democrats and Republican parties are trying to do to reach voters in this area. And at the end of the day, someone has to win and someone has to lose. That's the way our electoral system works. And it's kind of a shame that a lot of people see representatives as only representing their team instead of representing the whole district and all the people within it.
Yeah. Well, you worked with our partners at iNewsSource on this. So what can they tell us about the voting patterns and how they've changed in certain places?
So we have another map that you can look at that shows how voting patterns have changed between 3 recent elections in California. So the 2021 recall election, 2024 presidential election, and then now the 2025 Prop 50 election. And what iNewsSource found was in Chula Vista and the South Bay, there was actually a pretty strong swing towards Trump and towards Republicans in the 2024 election compared to previous. San Diego at large is kind of known as being democratically favored or leaning, and in 2024 there were some places that really went not completely towards Trump, but swung a lot more towards the Republican side than maybe people would have expected. But then you can see on the map that changes and goes right back in the 2025 Prop 50 vote, and that area pretty strongly supported yes on Prop 50, which was seen as a referendum on President Trump and his administration. And so that map shows that not only are voting patterns pretty unpredictable, you can't always tell which area is going to go which way, but also it shows that there's been a response to some of the things the administration has been doing, and there's been people who are saying we're going to vote and use our voices to make our voices heard, or use our vote to make our voices heard, excuse me, and say that they want to stand up for what they believe in and they want to push back against what's happening. And people saw Prop 50 as a way to do that. And people down in our partners at iNewsSource, they found down in Chula Vista, that was a lot of the common sentiment from people down there who thought in 2024 maybe they were voting based on cultural issues or, you know, social issues or even political issues, but now in 2025 there's been a lot of people who have seen how the vibes have shifted, if I can be a little unscientific, and that's something that certainly has changed in the past year or so. Is the vibe is very different now than it was in 2024.
Well, it's really interesting data, and we really do appreciate you breaking it all down for us, Jake. Thanks so much.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
And this story is part of our Public Matters initiative. You can learn more about it on our website at kpbs.org/Public Matters.
I'm Amna Nawaz. Tonight on the NewsHour, President Trump prepares to give the State of the Union 1 year into his second term. That's coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
San Diego's Claremont High School could soon have a new mascot, the Captains. KPBS education reporter Katie Anastas says the change comes after nearly a year of community input.
Since 1958, Claremont High School's mascot has been the Chieftains. Today, signs and murals outside the school depict a caricature of an indigenous man. In 2024, the California legislature passed a bill prohibiting schools from using derogatory Native American terms as team names or mascots, including Chieftains.
Although there'd been concern over the years about the name and, you know, people feeling uncomfortable with it, but really because of the state law is what really pushed this process.
In March 2025, San Diego Unified's Indian Education Program submitted a letter to the school board and superintendent, signed by local indigenous community members. They wrote, quote, "For decades, the Chieftains mascot has been a source of anti-indigenous racism because of the stereotypical imagery and portrayal that Claremont High School has permitted and promoted. From the Charlie Chieftain caricature to the chants and imagery used at school events, Native American people and culture have been a source of ridicule and mockery at the school." This isn't the first time a school in the district has changed its mascot. After a student-led petition in 2021, San Diego Unified renamed Junipero Serra High School to Canyon Hills High School and swapped its conquistador mascot for a rattlesnake. It is the first time a district school has changed its mascot because of the state law. Starting next school year, Claremont High School's mascot will likely be the Captains. School and district leaders held town hall meetings and asked community members for suggestions.
It was a really interesting process. It was a positive process. What was nice is that it was accepted that we weren't debating the why, we were working on the what, so that we're just making a decision on what it's going to become.
The finalists were Aviators, Captains, Seahawks, and Trailblazers. The district says more than 500 people rated the finalists, and Captains came out on top. The district says it signifies leadership. Plus, it ties in well with nearby Marston Middle School's mascot, the Mariners.
Claremont also historically been a military community, so it kind of, talks about, kind of represents that to some degree. And it's not gender specific. It could be a man, it could be a woman, it could be an animal with a captain's hat on. So we like the idea that there was flexibility around how we can use that.
The school plans to work with a graphic designer to come up with that new logo. They'll have 3 years to update signs, sports uniforms, and anything else with the old mascot. The school board is expected to approve the new captain's mascot tonight. Katie Anastas, KPBS News.
Scientists are raising concerns about teens using cannabis. It comes amid new research published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. KPBS health reporter Heidi DeMarco says the study associates the drug with increased risk for serious mental health conditions.
Experts say today's teens are growing up in a very different environment. Cannabis is legal for adults in California, widely marketed and often seen as socially acceptable. That can make it harder for teens to understand the potential risks.
We were able to follow nearly 500,000 adolescents who were confidentially screened for cannabis use as part of routine pediatric care. And then we examined the later onset of clinician-diagnosed psychotic, bipolar, depressive, and anxiety disorders within that same cohort, whereas many studies have only focused on one mental health outcome at a time.
They followed adolescents ages 13 to 17 over an 8-year period. Among all the mental health conditions examined, Kaiser Permanente researcher Kelly Young-Wolf says 2 stood out.
Now, the strongest associations were found for psychotic and bipolar disorders, where the risk was about doubled. And importantly, teens reported on their cannabis use about 1 to 2 years before their mental health diagnosis.
She says they accounted for other risk factors.
So we adjusted for things like sex and race and ethnicity, neighborhood deprivation, insurance type, other substance use. And, it is possible that some teens were using cannabis as a way to try to cope with early mental health symptoms, but we found that our associations remained even after accounting for prior psychiatric conditions.
The study does not prove cannabis causes these disorders, but Young-Wolf says the sequence, use first, diagnosis later, is raising concern. Dr. Natalie Laub is a pediatrician at Rady Children's Hospital. She says she's watching similar patterns unfold in the emergency room.
Prior to 2020, we were only seeing a handful of adolescents a year, maybe you're 20 or 30. In 2025, we saw nearly 600 adolescents, young adolescents, present to the emergency room because they needed treatment of some kind for their cannabis use.
She says today's products are far more potent than what previous generations were exposed to. Laub worries many families underestimate the risk.
Start talking about this sooner than you think is necessary. If you're not talking about the dangers of cannabis until your child is 12, 13, or 14, it's probably too late.
Researchers say more study is needed, but they hope the findings help parents and teens better understand the potential mental health risks tied to early cannabis use. Heidi DeMarco, KPBS News.
The San Diego City Council today approved reforms to the city's historic preservation rules. Thousands of properties in San Diego have been designated historic resources, and that means that they're covered by strict regulations on renovations and new construction. Critics say the rules can be weaponized to block new housing in desirable areas, neighborhoods. The reforms include a right to appeal historic designations to the City Council. Preservationists were opposed, saying they will politicize a process that's meant to be grounded in facts and evidence.
Package A is not a minor administrative update. It makes sweeping structural changes to how historic resources are evaluated, designated, appealed, and protected in the city of San Diego. These changes directly affect historic properties, historic districts, and the integrity of the city's preservation framework.
The reform package would also dedicate funding to preservation efforts in historically underrepresented and marginalized communities. The Trump administration is swiftly closing gaps in the California-Mexico border to stop humans from crossing. But as KPBS environment reporter Tammy Murga shows us, the construction is also dividing wildlife from precious resources.
On the eastern edge of California's peninsular ranges, the Jacamba Mountains reveal their dramatic pattern: tall, jagged spines with steep slopes dropping into dusty valleys. On a recent morning, Cristina Aiello looks out of the window of a small plane to see how far they extend into Mexico.
And the chain of mountains ahead of us, it's all part of the Peninsular Ranges, which go all the way from Palm Springs down into Baja California Sur.
She's a biologist with the Wildlands Network. She's trekked here in the rugged Jacamba Wilderness before. The aerial view offers a new perspective.
And the Peninsular Ranges is a pretty narrow north-south oriented range.
And a moment of reflection.
So before we kind of fragmented and developed this habitat, that mountain range was one continuous range of habitat for species like peninsular bighorn sheep.
It wasn't until the 1990s that miles of steel plates began dividing most of the California-Mexico region. Where nature provides a natural barrier, the metal wall stops. The rocky ridges didn't stop the bighorn sheep from migrating between both countries. But recently, concertina wire right behind me in Imperial County, just off the Jacamba Wilderness, has been added, and that's cut access to a lot of animals like bighorn sheep.
The bollard wall stops, and that is where the razor wire begins.
U.S. Customs and Border Protection, or CBP, has been adding large coils of concertina wire along the near vertical slopes. They're part of the federal government's plan to seal the last remaining gaps in the border wall. Aiello says they put collars on some of the sheep and are tracking
for signs of them being caught in the fence, because right now Customs and Border Protection are telling us concertina wire is not a threat to wildlife.
But, she says, wildlife does not recognize the wire fencing as an impassable barrier. They may attempt to cross it and risk getting tangled up and injured. Across the border in Mexico, Enrique Ruiz hikes the dusty desert valleys Aiello saw from the sky. He's a researcher at the Autonomous University of Baja California. He's looking for bighorn sheep.
This is the proof of the sheep's.
Droppings the size of lima beans left near where water leaks from a pipe. Ruiz says they come here and to a nearby oasis to drink. He says closing the border wall will split the species' home range in half.
En Estados Unidos es donde tienen la comida. Si se dan cuenta o si pudieran ver, pues aquí no hay mucha vegetación de la cual se puedan alimentar los borregos, pero aquí vienen por el agua.
Borregos, or sheep, are one of the most cherished animals in Baja California. Their iconic curled horns and grit against the desert environment are depicted in indigenous rock engravings. To preserve this emblematic species, the university established a sanctuary. Reese works on the sanctuary project. He says conservationists are shifting their focus to the border region because of the closure. They're starting to work with Aiello to document wildlife crossings before the wall is completed.
El objetivo del estudio pues sería demostrar la importancia que tiene el mantenerlo abierto.
Ruiz and Aiello say wildlife openings on the wall are one way to keep the habitats connected. They want small passages the size of a sheet of paper and larger ones that accommodate animals like the endangered bighorn sheep. The Wildlands Network has evidence that these passages are working in other states. Their cameras show crossings by mountain lions, javelinas, and coyotes.
It can allow animals to get some resources that they need. That, at least, is avoiding some of the worst impacts. So we think they're going to be included here in California as well.
CBP confirmed that it is working to identify locations here for small wildlife passages. But there are no plans for large openings. Instead, large animals would have to use new floodgates if they are open. Aiello worries the option is incompatible with how some species migrate. She hopes CBP will be open to other ideas.
I think asking for no new border barrier is unrealistic, and we've kind of accepted that. But I think that doesn't mean we totally give up the effort for making things better for wildlife. I think we just adjust what we ask for, and that is going to involve compromise.
Scientists and conservationists say animals stuck on either side of the border will travel far outside their range in search of food and water. But another major man-made threat awaits them. That's part 2 tomorrow. Tammy Murga, KPBS News.
Let's check out our weather headlines because I think the first one a lot of us are enjoying here with the warmer, drier weather holding on. That's through the end of the week. A few little hiccups at times, some patchy coastal fog Wednesday and Thursday morning, and then some brisk westerly winds returning to the mountains and the deserts later into the day on Wednesday. Another partly cloudy night and overall rather comfortable temperatures. Borrego Springs 55, Mount Laguna down to 48, San Diego drops to 54, Oceanside 48, and Chula Vista dropping down to 52 degrees. A lot of warmth stretching across parts of the southwest, including temperatures well above the historical average into Arizona and into New Mexico, and the precipitation slides east as well. That's really been dominating northern parts of California. By Wednesday, we'll continue to see some showers back towards the Salt Lake City and Denver area, and they've been lacking precipitation in the form of snowfall, so I'm sure they're looking forward to that. A hot day tomorrow into Borrego Springs, 91 degrees, Mount Laguna 60 degrees, and nice along the coast as well. Oceanside 68, San Diego 70, and Chula Vista you'll see temperatures into the lower 70s. Thursday still quite pleasant here as temperatures continue to be warm and conditions continue to be dry thanks to high pressure dominating the forecast here through the end of the week. All right, we'll take you towards the coast where sunny to partly cloudy on Wednesday and a nice stretch of 70s Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and temperatures dip down a bit by Sunday. We look a bit further inland. Woo-wee, temperatures really climbing. Upper 70s become low 80s. Low 80s become the upper 80s as the heat peaks on Friday, and then temperatures fall a bit Saturday and Sunday. Across the mountain locations, there's that wind I was talking about for Wednesday. Otherwise, pretty pleasant Friday through the weekend. And we take into some of the desert locations as the heat continues to build. Some of the warmest days coming Friday into Saturday. For KPBS News, I'm Ariella Scalise.
Find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Enjoy your evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, air, restoration, and flood services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.